Hi, I'm Carrie Joel, and welcome to Avenue Code's Extraordinary Women in Technology podcast. This is where we bring you inspiring conversations with top executives and technology leaders. Just a quick reminder that if you're listening on a podcast platform, please be sure to follow us. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to subscribe. I am thrilled today to host Mamta Sethi, who is the CIO of Global Functions at Manulife Financial. First, let me say thank you for being here and welcome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
So you are one of our newest EWiT Diamond members. Do we want to start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Carrie, and thanks for having me. As Carrie mentioned, I am the CIO of Global Functions at Manulife Financial. Myself, I grew up. Yeah, been born in India actually, but raised in Canada since I was 11 months old. So Toronto's been my home and still is. Been in multiple roles throughout my career within consulting, banking, and now insurance, and have two little kids at home. I have a passion for reading, traveling, and do a lot of running and hit. So that's kind of my summary in a nutshell.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I've had an opportunity to meet with you a couple times. You are also our keynote speaker at one of our EWiT events here in Toronto, where actually we both live. And
Yeah.
I think one of the questions that is important to talk about is you've had amazing roles in banking, consulting, but always in technology. What inspired you to go into tech?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carrie, and I get that asked quite a bit. I actually did not think I would end up in technology. So my life's goal was I was always really good at math, and so I thought finance and analytics is really where I need to be. I'll be a trader or a banker and kind of do that. Also a male-dominated industry, but thought that it would be the path I would take. When I went to university, I did that. I did a major in finance and analytics, and then I had some minors here and there. And underlying in a lot of the things I did, whether they were co-op programs or when I started my career in consulting and then kind of moved into banking, everything that I ended up doing had an undertone of technology. So this was more junior in my career, whether it's implementing tech programs, integrating technology platforms, looking at all of that. On a consulting side, but having that undertone there. So I'd say about 7, 8 years ago, I constantly moving in this world. I had a mentor at the time who said to me, "You'd be great at leading in this space. And let's think of your career now and progress further. Why don't you take a role on in infrastructure and operations?" As well as working with the app dev teams to try to integrate the two, because you're really good at that and you're really good at also understanding the landscape and how we can, as you know, infrastructure and app dev don't necessarily always stay hand in hand. Well, historically, I think that's changing now. But that was kind of where I got my first leadership role in that space and thought, okay, I think I can do this because I know I've been doing it for a while. And then it became something that became sort of a passion, became the advocate for women in technology, started a program at RBC at the time where I was that teach youth to code. So it was an ad hoc program, and started kind of progressively moving forward, running DevOps, and then leading global technology, and now being the CIO. It was just something that I felt came naturally to me because when you think of technology, the biggest gap is women in technology and diversity of thought and experience and how you can make that stronger. So I'm not saying it's just me. I've seen women who enter the space that may have been dabbling or thinking about it, or may not even have gone there after doing a software engineering degree. And as they come in, they tend to progress because that's really what's needed. And so I think that was a big part of that. But also, I have to be honest, allyship and mentorship was a big part of how I kind of kept going, right? And I'd say to this date, I have that. So, and I'm sure if I'm thinking about other women listening to this, I'm sure that's what they're looking for as well. So it was something that, I felt was just a natural kind of fit. Now I can't see anything else.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because to get to that senior position, you had to almost take a role in infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is a little bit its own beast. And
It is.
I have also had the opportunity of leading infrastructure teams and came from an app dev background. And I remember that first role was kind of scary
Yeah.
because, infrastructure is also 24/7.
Oh
It's,
yeah.
or, right, you're running the, whatever, the company, the bank. I
Yeah.
mean, you're
Yeah.
running critical infrastructure.
Right.
It matters, and when you look at those, you think of, there's risk and compliance. There's, you've got that, you got to be up 99, what is it, 9 nines, 99.9999, yeah, 5 nines, like,
Yeah. Yes. Now it's 5 9.
yeah, 5 nines, a lot of nines, like you got to
Yeah.
all basically. But also, I think what sometimes people don't realize is it's an incredibly innovative space.
Yeah.
Just like app dev, there is the same innovation technology, and in some ways sometimes more. So I guess one of my questions is, how, like, can you talk to us about how do you balance that innovation with those, real serious roles, whether it, in any of the regulated industries where you've got, security, compliance, uptime constraints. I'd just love to understand how you kind of think
Yeah.
about it, how you approach it.
Yeah, I think it comes with the company, right? So, is this company invested in innovation, or is it there just to keep the lights on, right? So, and it's tough in insurance, I'll tell you that, because it's what are you really innovating at the time? Like, there's things you can do that are different, and you think of like insure techs and whatnot. But what are you doing? And at the bank, we were fortunate to have it. The transaction level in banking is a little different than insurance, right? So you have to think of how do you innovate to make that easier, and how do you make it a digital centric bank. So what we've done at Manulife, and just in general, like I'd say, if we think of risk and compliance at an organization, so let's forget, you know, uh, organization agnostic, and you
Right.
think of financial institutions or insurance companies that are heavily regulated, how do you innovate there? Well, at the end of the day, you have to think of the customer and what the customer wants. And I'm just giving the background of the innovation and where that comes from, and then how do you manage that on the back end? And think of what do we need to do to actually meet customer need, demand, and actually be the leader in that space, like be that leader to get a policy approved or get an insurance claim approved in the fastest way, or what are some things that they're looking for as an end user that would be different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you get that and you think, okay, there's 5 or 6 things that we need to do. What are the in order to help expedite in that space and think of risk and control and compliance, you really have to have a strong so you have to have a strong risk and compliance framework. And I'd have to say a lot of the Canadian regulated industries do. But how do you manage the speed for that? It's so being there is one thing. It's the speed that becomes an issue for an innovator, a developer who's like, I could go to Google today and have something launched ready to go in 5 minutes. You're asking me to do something that may not be as sexy as something at Google, which I'm still doing, which is still innovating, but you're going to tell me it takes 9 months. How am I going to make that happen? Right. So we are actually at that crux of how do we make these, how do we deliver in a speedier and a more efficient way, where you got to really work with the industry itself and see what are some things that the risk tolerance can bring down or bring up, and what are things that we can mitigate, what are things we've done in the past that we can replicate, so we're not in that space that we're constantly fighting with risk and fighting with legal and procurement and whatever it is to try to get something out the door, because this thing took them 5 to 10 minutes to do, and now we're like at this
Right.
bottle. So I would say I don't have the best answer, but what I can say is pushing the envelope and continually pushing the envelope and not accepting it, because you'll lose your talent. Number one, that's what we know. But second, with everything happening with now AI, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point, but like with AI, it's everything is faster. So these folks that created something in 5 minutes can now do it maybe in a minute, right? So like we have to be really mindful of the developer experience overall to try to get something out the door. So anyway, that's how we're doing it, and that's how we're trying to push it. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm not sure there's actually the easy button. Like I actually have to be honest on that, because it is something we have to be like, look at all the data breaches happening, looking at everything. So we do have to keep that in mind. It's just how do we make it faster? That's
Well, and like the reason leadership roles are senior, and honestly, they're really coveted jobs, is because they're tough. like there isn't easy answers, and there's nuance after layer of nuance. It's, balancing. You can't be successful without the people. You can't,
Right.
like, and the people need to be enabled, but then you can't, risk you're accountable to shareholders. You're accountable, yeah, right? And so it's like always a balancing act. And it's interesting you bring up AI, because I think that is going to be the new balancing act. And there is, without a doubt, I mean, the innovation in the space is, unbelievable. I work in it every day, and I feel like every week we're updating, and kind of the thoughts of, 6 weeks ago are almost outdated. I think the speed at which you can develop your solutions absolutely is so quick. I'm curious. I think AI brings in a whole new dimension of, I guess, balance, because you also have the potential of bias, in addition to kind of the usual innovation versus how do you think about the AI space, and what are you kind of excited about? How are you approaching it? I think everyone would just love to know your thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think, um, like every organization, you want to eat it up as fast as possible and use it and try to make it work for you, no matter how regulated. And I think that is the beauty of AI, because it's this magic solution which we don't have the end state yet, but not that there is an end state, but I'm saying that, that we've just adopted, that it has promised so much in bringing speed, efficiency, and productivity like nobody can believe. So we as an organization, just overall, I think all organizations are just eating it up and trying to see how they can make it work for them. With that comes a lot of baggage, not baggage, but
Yeah,
what's
I
the
think
word?
packages,
Red tape,
package is
baggage.
fair. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, there's a lot that you have to consider, because you can't just eat, like it's like I make it an analogy, like with my team, that you have little toddlers, right, that are eating, and then there's like this bib they have to wear, and it's all over their bib, and you're trying to figure out how can I teach this toddler to eat in a way that is like with a knife and fork and it's not getting it all over their bib. And so it's, and I would say like that red tape and the baggage and figuring out how to make it work right for your organization is that, one part of that is the bias, one part of that is regulations, one part of that is responsibility of how we're creating our products. We as an organization, I'd say, and just say most organizations have been starting to think about this for a while. AI isn't new to us. Gen AI is, right? But like AI
Right.
is not new to us. So what are the guardrails as an organization that you're going to put in place? And Europe was at the founding of all of this, right? They were really thinking about this probably 6, 7 years before us. And it's having that, like, having councils in place to look at how we're actually responsibly developing what the product looks like, being on top of that within regulations and industries and internationally, because we are a global organization. Second, now with the advance of AI, like Gen AI coming through, and what that looks like is, how do we look at the diverse, like if we think of Microsoft, for example, launching Copilot and launching ChatGPT. We have a partnership, like, overall, like what is Microsoft doing? What are our vendors doing? Our other vendor partners, like that we work with, our consulting partners, how are they using Gen AI in a responsible way? And we have a very structured method of understanding, what's the diversity there? What does that look like? Also partnering with organizations externally and helping evolve that agenda. So we have a partnership with BPTN, Black Professional Technology Network. And that's something they're really thinking through is, people who create for the products, for like that get the data that gets fed in is the data that gets fed out. So who's creating the data, or who's putting in the data, and who's developing products that, and what do those people look like? Do they look like me? Do they look like you, Carrie? Do they look like, Bill Gates? Like what is it that they're doing? So it's asking those questions, and I'm very pointed about that. Even when we're partnering, we have this big like assessment, and it's agnostic of which organization I'm at, but assessment of who is it, how are they doing it, the 7 questions you have to ask: who, what, when, where, how, and what um what are they going to bring to me that is diverse and different, and then that product, when we create it internally, at least has that in there. Now, it doesn't stop at just external, the partners we're working with, it's intern, right? We have to be very mindful of the people that are actually doing the work. Like, is it a diverse slate of people that are actually doing work? And I mean diverse in the sense like it can't just be all one race, or it's
Right.
gender, race, ethnicity, everything, right? And bringing that to the table. So, I use my own self, I use metrics of who's on my team, what kind of, like, is it diverse enough? And if it's not, I really have to make a conscious effort to make that happen. So it's just, I think it's a good hygiene practice no matter AI or not, technology or not, but in tech, it is actually a big deal. And I think it gets even harder when you're in different countries, right? Like if you're, for us in Asia, for example, diversity is not an issue at all. It's how do you bring in different mindsets, like accessibility and different things
Right.
on how to develop a product. So that's also something I think overall people are thinking through. Do Again, this isn't, it's a lot of the stuff is new because of the speed of what we're doing, but a lot of stuff I think people have created good hygiene on that I think they're bringing in. So that's how I approach it and look at it.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting, right? Because it is that foundationally it's bias, right? And
Yes.
and bias, unfortunately, is nothing new. I mean, I am
No.
sure for yourself, being a woman in technology. I mean, I know for me there was many, many meetings where I'm a woman, got all guys around the table, and frankly, there was an age and an ethnicity that was
Yeah.
very similar of all the guys around the table, and then there was me, and I didn't feel I fit in, and I think
Yeah.
there's unconscious bias, there's overt bias. I mean, and sometimes, it even comes from yourself, right? And so I'm curious if you could help people, like in your own experience, you must have had to overcome bias. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you did it? Like, do you have some, I don't know,
Mhm.
tricks of the trade or something you could share with, especially some of our younger
Yeah.
women listening?
So I've experienced it quite a bit, in consulting, and then in finance roles, like a lot of those when I was kind of helping the finance team, even from a tech perspective, it's always still in most cases very male dominated and very specific to certain areas. Um, I always thought in my head, I belong, even when it was like a big imposter syndrome. Like it was just always like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be here. And I think that they're going to just figure this out and then I'm going to walk out of here and like it is what it is. But in my head, I always thought, no, no. The things they're saying is I know I can answer these questions. I actually know more. And I'm wondering if if it at times I used to feel like, are they dumbing it down for me? Or like, am I just actually smarter than some of these people that are here? And so I think it bringing that confidence out, and it was very difficult to do so. I would say there's times I would be practicing in at home, looking in mirrors, just reading stuff and making sure I knew what to do and what to say, because these big board meetings or big meetings were important, and I needed to present myself in the best possible light, and especially because as I was progressing, it was a make or break situation. You had an SVP in the room, and oh my God, I'm a manager or a director now, and like I need to present myself in the right way so that they see me. It's not just the content, but it's also the confidence that comes with it. I'll tell you, majority of the time, so like if you actually listen to people in the room, it's just confidence. I'm not sure the content is actually really right. And so I would say to people that are looking is that if you know you need to, if you should be there, you should be there. If you know the content and you know what to say, be there and say it. Don't feel shy, because frankly speaking, that's the only way I think you'll progress. And as a woman, especially because men don't care. Men will say whatever they want and they'll, ask for forgiveness later. Women are so cautious. Like, will it be perceived in the right way? And what if I say something dumb? I'm just going to keep myself and not say anything at all because that's safer. It is not always safer. You have to be confident and say what you're thinking. And also, the stuff. Like, if you know your stuff, I mean, don't say something if you don't know what you're talking about. Just keep your mouth shut. Don't be that confident. But like, just do what you need to do to get the job done. And it always translates. I'm telling you without fail. And that's what I tell mentees. I tell everyone, you have to know you belong. Like that is, you can't think it's just an option. You actually need to be there. I still get that coaching sometimes. I'm not even joking from my
Yeah.
boss. He's
Wow.
CIO, and it's 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 uh it's something you really need to to hone and like be like it's a practice sort of thing. So I feel like that's what over the course of the years you continue to do it and you're continually learning, but like you continually have to do that because the audience gets more.
Well, and I love it, right? Like I've always believed that competence breeds confidence. And
Yeah,
so when you have that confidence, you know you're supposed to be there because you
yeah,
know you deserve to be there. And that breeds into the confidence of standing up. And it is hard. I mean, I think we've all been there where, you start out and your voice might break or it's a little shaky,
yeah,
but then
yeah,
you start talking about what you know. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, right? The
yeah,
confidence comes and it's like it goes really well. And I think,
yeah,
but it's taking that first step and just knowing you'll get through it, right? That's
yeah,
and and I mean, I think the other thing that I'd love to ask you about is I know that you've got a lovely family, you've got great support, a network of support, and work-life balance is a big part of that. I think it's something that everybody struggles with, men, women, like,
yeah, yeah,
race. Like I like it, but I think for women, there's a different level to it. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about the work-life balance and sort of,
yeah,
what you do to try and maintain it and why it's important to you?
yeah. It's a great question. I get it asked a lot, and I've always gotten it asked. I approach work-life balance as work-life integration. And I know that it sounds more daunting than it actually is. And I'll explain. Throughout my life, I I have there's this personality score thingies, and you look at the way that you work. And one thing that always mattered to me is productivity as well as the output and what I get out of it, no matter what it is, apparently, right? It could be anything. So for me, I always want to be perfect in everything, like a lot of people are, right? Like they want to be a perfect mother, a perfect wife, a perfect daughter, perfect sister, and a perfect employee, and a perfect student. Like there's always that drive in me. But the way that I approach looking at everything in its totality is that I'm going to get it all done today. I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do it myself. And that's only on me. I don't need to put that on anybody else. This is my job to figure out. My kids depend on me more than their dad. And I'll be honest, it's a mother thing, right? And if I have to travel or if I have to do something, I have to figure out that pie for my children as well as myself. And even something like, I have aging parents and like things like that to make it work. I see work is what I got to get done. The bills have to get paid. This is what I have to do today. In that, how can I parcel it out so that I still get to do the soccer game or I get to do the cooking and I get to do this? And sometimes things fall off, and sometimes things are called ordering in. Sometimes things are called getting the person to come and clean your house. Like it's things you've got to do to outsource or make work to try to get the high priority things. And so once I parcel out what I have to do, I prioritize what is the most important thing and then prioritize going down. And the stuff that's low priority, can that be funneled out? Can it be outsourced? Can I get something else done? Can I move it to tomorrow or the day after? And that's how I really list the day always, every single day. And I list out every little thing I need to do. And I actually have to really leverage. And frankly speaking, there is a village. Like at times, my in-laws, when they're in town, they're snowbirds, but when they're here, I'll say, can you pick them up from school or can you take them to this activity? I have an evening event, and I make that work. My husband, same thing. Like, let's figure out the days. Like, we have to be in the office 3 days a week. So does he. How do we toggle it so that it's workable for everyone and make it work for everyone? It's not easy. It is actually very difficult to do. But once it gets done, everything gets done, right? So I try to prioritize that. And then vacation comes and, you get that time off that you don't have to think about anything at all. But I do believe as you get more senior, it becomes a little harder. And the demands on you from a work perspective are a lot more than they are than when you weren't, right? So you have to figure out, and it's okay if you want to. Some people may not think that a CIO role or an SVP role or a VP role is for them because of the other things that are important. And it's okay. It's just, how do you prioritize in your head what's, how you want your career to be and where it wants to go. So now that I tell you about my day and how I look at work-life balance, I think you have to also think about your career and what does that look like, because it may not stop, right? So there may be more demands on something that may not be your priority. So you have to figure out what that priority is. And in life, and I just am saying this as a woman to women out there, sometimes the priority is not something you want it to be, and you have to make that a priority. So it's okay to take that time to do that too, right? And don't feel like, I feel like people think work is work. We're in the Western culture. I go to Europe and I think, oh my God, these people are living their life, right? Like, but for us, this is how we've been groomed. This is how we've been raised, that your career is important. You got to keep going. You got to keep doing this. But at times that balance means taking a minute and thinking of something else. Like I went on maternity leave and I took 15 months. At that time, it was 12 months and both kids, because I knew that at that time that was really important to me. And that's how I balanced everything. Job will always be there, right? So I think people get misconstrued, like even for your self-care, I'm sure you're asked, like, you probably don't even like, go anywhere or meet your friends or don't do this or don't do that. Like, how do you do it? And I did it. And I say, I've done it and I still try to do it. Of course, it's not always the same thing. Like I'm not going out with my friends every night. I'm not doing this. I'm prioritizing it for that day and for that week and for that month and what's important to me. So I know it's a long-winded answer, but I think it's an important one that people need to hear.
And the two things I love about that is like ask for help. Like you
Oh,
just like and you know what's
yeah.
interesting about asking for help, and maybe is then people feel okay to ask for you for help. And I know we've got
Yes.
kids in hockey, right?
Yeah.
And two kids in high level hockey, I can't even tell you how many times we're driving me in the rink, and there are times when it's like, hey, can you pick up my kid, or can you drive my kid,
Of
or
course.
and
Yeah.
and then people ask you, and you realize that's how you form those communities. And it doesn't stop when the kids are little. Like I've got teenagers, and in some ways, I said the other day to a friend of mine, I said, I almost feel like they need me more. Like you don't ever stop being a parent. You don't ever stop being a
Yeah.
spouse, a friend,
Yeah.
a daughter, and you
Yeah.
just asking for help and being there. I do think sometimes it's just showing up, even
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
feel like you can't make it work. But yeah, no, I mean, you have accomplished so much in your career. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask one question that we haven't really talked about, but what's one of the most fun things that you've been able to do and say in your career, like that you're really proud of, that you just, I don't know, you just take that moment where you're like, hey, that's kind of awesome. We had a woman, part of the Diamond member, and she showed me a necklace that was given to her by her mother, and it was shattered glass in a pendant, and it symbolized,
Yeah.
her, and like
Mhm.
it's not an expensive thing, but I was like,
Yeah.
wow, like I was, almost in tears. I was just curious, just something fun that you're proud of, that you love doing.
Yeah. That I love doing in general or work related.
Anything, whatever. Something to leave your audience with about you, because I know how special you are, to a lot of
Thank
people.
you. I would have to say, not many people in North America, as a background of mine, like being South Asian. So I wouldn't even say South Asian men. Yeah, you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
Satya, like everywhere, right? Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
all
yeah.
around the world. And so and I'm nowhere anywhere close to comparing, but I'm saying that South Asian women, and I just actually recently went to India, but I've been going to India my whole life. Like I went to India for a wedding and work, and my whole life, every 2 years I'd go. My entire extended family's there, and I looked at some of these girls, and they were coming from villages, and there's like these programs people have put in place in companies there, which is awesome, to get women out of villages to actually work because they can't even educate themselves. And I think that if by me being where I am today, which I do for myself, it has no other purpose. It's just because I've always wanted to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
I love leading people. I love leading teams. I love leading what I'm doing. By people seeing me and seeing me in that position, it was International Women's Day, and it's more relevant now. I've thought about this a lot, but just being in this position and motivating folks to actually move forward. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I hate that feeling, but I feel that that adds value no matter what, and especially for my um, race. Like so in
Yeah.
India, I actually felt like I was a weirdo, like going to these companies and like I'm a woman and these people, I don't know if they're thinking, oh my God, it's like a woman and I have to like work with this person and I have never seen that before. So I've never felt that way. Like here, I feel like, oh yeah, there's women in tech, I guess. Like, yeah, it's not as good. But that being that South Asian woman, I think that's the one thing that I feel I hold pretty near and dear to my heart. I feel like it's a responsibility more than it is a job. And if I can help and if I can, and which is what I do nonstop, I can help mentor and even motivate people to move and do this, it means a lot to me. It actually is something that I feel like I have to keep doing this just for that purpose, not for me anymore. Like it's just something I feel I have to bring forward.
Well, and I know because I've been at those events with you, and I know the inspiration that you bring and how that just being there is so important. So for everything you've done on behalf of our listeners and of myself, I thank you for being here, for telling your story. We learn from each other. I look very forward to seeing you at our next EWiT event. And
Yes,
thank you so much for being part of EWiT Diamond and
thank you so
sharing your
much.
story. So thank you.
Thank you.
And wonderful talking with you again.
Yeah, you too, Carrie. Thank you so much.